actually, are they incompetent? Or is it in bad faith? Government says they're not going to pay any compensation to the victims' families. That's fine. But pariah who potentially, well, let me not say that. Pariah who failed in the rescue efforts, you're going to expect them to deal with the situation properly? And folks, why does this matter for the rest of us, besides the fact that your fellow citizens are potentially being treated quite unfairly and in a manner that is unbecoming of any office that has honorable in front of it? Well, there is also the fact that if it could happen to them, it could happen to any one of us. All right, let's move on to the next story. And I don't know necessarily how I feel about this, because I have lamented for, I don't know, almost 2 years now, the fact that children are being murdered. I'm not really seeing anything. I'm not seeing any protests. I'm not seeing enough outrage. I'm not seeing much of anything. It just seems as though it was another Tuesday. Every time, usually it's a little boy. In some cases, they are girls. Gets hit by a stray bullet or what have you, right? Sometimes they are misses, and I think we don't appreciate how lucky we are as a nation of the near misses. In fact, there was a shooting over the weekend. One man was wounded, as well as a 4-year-old boy. And given, the fact that an average 4-year-old is not necessarily that big, the kind of damage that a single bullet could do, even if it's not immediately fatal, such a traumatic injury. The boy was only shot in his hand. And we're fortunate as a society that we do not have another child to mourn. Now, the Children's Authority, they are, I don't know again if this is another situation where the horse is bolted out the barn and now we're trying to close the barn door after the fact. They're having calls to end violence, particularly against children. Well, I mean, on one hand, I get it, right? They do have to say these things, at some point it might seem obvious, but they have to say it. They have to actually formally put out the statements out there. But on the other hand, it seems insignificant, right? We are long past the point where a statement by a body of authority overseeing whatever the situation is going to make much of a difference. The problems are so far beyond such a simple beginnings of a solution. This is not the beginnings of a solution. This is just going through the motions. And like I said, I get it. It's what you're supposed to do. I understand. It's just that we don't see much of anything that comes after that. So if you go through the motions, but there's no follow-up, then it just appears like lip service that is meaningless. And the unfortunate thing is, I've reached to the point of cynicism now where I'm reading what members of the opposition are saying about this. And technically speaking, I should agree with them, right? Because I find the situation is beyond the pale. It is so far gone, it horrifies me. I am relatively numb to murders of young men in their early 20s and older, and to some extent even the older teens. Children's murders still affect me, right? But the rhetoric in the opposition members' messaging, it's just so unnecessary to me that I don't understand it. I don't get it. I didn't necessarily want to highlight it too much. I just found that it's going in a direction that's unnecessary. Now, to some extent though, I can't say that what the opposition is saying is not entirely wrong, because we have a high court judge basically having to question the failure to ensure that a criminal case, this is a criminal case where a child was raped, and there's a failure to expedite this trial, which is part of her right to protection under law. And now I believe that the state is appealing the ruling where the judge is basically saying that it did not put enough things in place and it has to. And when things like this happen, that a high court judge has to admonish the state for not having a speedy trial in a child rape case, it does kind of, again, it makes statements from the Children's Authority seem, granted, Children's Authority has nothing to do with either the DPP, prosecutors, the police, the judiciary, I get it, right? Although they might be involved in this case. But as far as I'm aware, they don't actually handle the court matters and the prosecution. But to some extent, it's difficult for citizens to look at the systems of government and the criminal justice system on a whole and say, well, oh, they're all silos that have nothing to do with each other. To some extent, it is true that the sins of one area does not automatically apply to others. But to citizens who are dealing with this sort of problem every day, they don't want to hear that. They want a government that has, a handle on things. Reasonably speaking, of course. And things like this make it seem as though they don't have a handle on things, because we can't even, we arrested a guy. We have him for trial. I assume it's a guy. We can't even sort this out properly. Basic functions of having the trial in I don't even know if the judge may have accepted even, relatively quickly, not just absolute quickness. Where's the care and concern? I don't get it. See, the problem is, the Paria tragedy, for better or worse, it happened. And it's not as though we have industrial accidents every other week. But we do have, it seems, murders, every day. And child murders can happen every other week. But it seems as though somehow, perhaps, the situation is ignored by the people in higher office. They don't really speak about it, right? Except when they want to gain sympathy points for whatever speech they have any moment. And even then, I don't really remember any politician, at least from the majority government bench, speaking about the murders of children in any way that is satisfactory to moi. I don't know. So far, the tactic worked. We just don't say anything, don't acknowledge it, and it'll be lost in a new cycle. I don't know if Ezekiel's death might be the rallying cry, like how Andrea Barrett and some of those other young ladies were at that time. And to be fair to them, those victims, I do find that to some extent we forgot their names and their stories too soon. And we allowed their passing and the crimes that were committed when they were murdered, as a public, we allowed the relevant authorities to get away with not giving us satisfactory answers to the worsening situation. We allowed the relevant authorities to get away too easily. Anyway, let's take a break. When we come back, we'll continue with the daily review here on Talking Point on WSN. Your content capital, we're going to keep swinging. We'll be right back after this.
Hello there and welcome to AM Prime on WESN Content Capital. Before we even start this repatriation and reintegration process that we've already failed, or are we doomed to fail?
You've got to invest in the institutions that you've established to carry out those sorts of core functions.
We now get into the regional updates to give you an understanding of what's happening across our neighboring islands.
We have available a number of films that are worth showing.
So it was day one when the French Revolution started to develop the concept of universal human rights.
What happened this time is unprecedented. It's one of the largest terrorist attacks in history.
Let's welcome Carl to the program. Carl is over there next to himself. Hello, Carl.
Silky anteater or pygmy anteater, and we have two of the three species of anteaters right here.
Welcome back to Talking Point, ladies and gentlemen. And I mean, there's a lot more with regards to this, I guess, this situation we found ourselves in where now murders are more and more reaching out and claiming the lives of young ones, or in some cases that we have seen, there might be just as many cases where, you know, the Grim Reaper was close but didn't actually touch children. And we should be grateful every time there's a near miss, so to speak, although in many cases they still get shot, they still get wounded and even shot in the hand for a 4-year-old. That's not going to be a small hole in his tiny hands. But moving on now, stop me if you've heard this one before. There's an issue going on with a promotion of a police officer. There's another one. There's just another one. And this time, it seems as though this is a bit more complex. It's a singular case. There was an officer who was, I guess you could say, retroactively promoted. In 2022, he was retroactively promoted. His promotion applies from December 2020. And then it seems as though through the assessment for promotion to a higher rank, he was not included. And he has an issue with that. This is a bit more complex because he's claiming that, look, there's no reason for the commissioner not to assess him at the higher rank, except the one thing is, I don't know what his actual duties were, but a retroactive promotion does not retroactively give you experience in a higher grade, which will come with a billet or job of that higher grade, right? So you could be, you know, a lieutenant, platoon lieutenant in any army. That's generally the rank ascribed to leading a platoon. And you might have been retroactively given the rank of captain, applied 1.5 to 2 years, you know, in the past. You don't actually have experience of 1.5 to 2 years commanding a company. You command a platoon. So I don't necessarily know all the details. It's just that, and it seems as though other officers who were retroactively promoted may have gotten career advancements when he didn't. But one could argue it's all in the details, right? Perhaps they have relevant experience that he did not get for whatever reason. I think the real takeaway from this, though, is not this actual specific case, the merits of it, but rather, why was this allowed to happen in the first place? And it's minor when compared to all of the other issues and all of the other promotion controversies that the TTPS has, but it still exists, and it's still another example of things kind of going wrong. If it was the only situation, then it would be different. Then the context would change greatly, but it's not the only situation. So again, I have to ask, how many more things like this must be piled on before more of the population understands, including the government, who are part of the population when you think about it, right? They technically are protected by the same police service that we are, in theory. Will understand the level of issues that the police service currently has. And since it's not like a delay in luxury goods or auto mechanics going on strike or port workers going on strike or even bus drivers going on strike, or even if the public transportation system was ground to a halt, right? And it would cause major traffic and people might be stranded or whatever. It's not as bad as the people who are supposed to protect us from violent criminals. Their administration has reached the point where it may or may not be affecting the morale of officers within the service, which then may or may not affect their effectiveness and the effort they put into their job, which again, we're not talking about some mundane good or service. We're talking about protecting the lives of the people of the country. It ranks right up there with doctors, right? Because mistakes or a lack of effort in this field could potentially lead to deaths. But apparently it's not that important, right? Let's just keep blaming the commissioner because she's in the seat. And just because you're in the seat means that you should support her. It would have been nice for the Prime Minister to say, well, when Kamala was the Prime Minister, she was holding the seat. So as the opposition, we are, beholden to support her and her initiatives because she's Prime Minister. Is that how it's supposed to work? I don't think so, right? We are allowed to criticize people when they're doing a bad job. That was the whole basis of your arguments as opposition leader when you were opposition leader at that time during the People's Partnership Administration. But again, it seems as though that politicians like to shoot from the hip, rhetorically speaking, and not actually think about the long-term implications of what they say. And then they, to some extent, contradict themselves. All right, let's move on. Something that's interesting, not going to spend too long on this, but in Tobago, there are questions with regards to approval for major projects. Of course, the one that is at the forefront is the THA's highway expansion project, right, from Cove Road to Strawberry Local Road, where I believe part of it might still technically, it's questioned if it has AMA approval. Then, of course, I mean, this is not new. We could go back, I think, to the stage by the sea and question if that had AMA approval. The flip side is, I think the Secretary in the Division of Infrastructure, is it infrastructure? I think he was questioning about the airport project and its local approvals because the THA has pointed out the fact that certain things come under the THA due to the THA Act. And then it basically just leads back to projects in Tobago just on a whole seem to be happening without proper approvals. And they may or may not, these may or may not be symptoms or signs of a turf war. Now, to what extent is the AMA seen as an enforcement tool of the government to enforce the claims on territory, rhetorically speaking? I don't know, right? Is the AMA independent? Is it not? It's kind of hard to believe anything is independent right now when they're supposed to be, except the DPP's office, because he flat out disagreed with the office being put at the Park Street location. But it seems as though Tobago is ending up being a Wild West. I don't like the implications of this, but I doubt we'll get enough details to really have a proper opinion. We might hear some things from callers from Tobago, but again, I'll leave that where it is. Let's move on to the next story. And like I said, it seems as though politicians don't really understand the implications of what they say, and they shoot from the hip, rhetorically speaking, when they speak. And then, they admonish us for pointing out when they show their lack of proficiency at communicating. Now, last week, I made great issue with, at the Joint Select Committee, there was talk about taxing artists that are touring abroad. And it seems as though those taxes won't just be personal income taxes, but something beyond. That's my interpretation, right? And so much so was that an issue that the Minister of Tourism, kudos again to him, came out, I believe it was the next day, and said, no, we're not doing that. There's no plans for that, right? Now, the Minister of Finance has come out and said, well, hey, hold on, the Joint Select Committee is not a policy-making body. They don't do that there. Cabinet does that. We're the big boys. They're not the big boys. Don't doubt me. Right? The problem is the manner and how he does it. I don't know if it felt just a little bit undermining. You know, just a little bit like, hey, we're the big brothers, cabinet, aka cabinet. They're the little brother, aka joint select committees. And he did acknowledge it's important for a system of democracy for transparency. And I myself find that, you know, the various committees are quite valuable. I would hope that more things like that continue. But the way how he did it, because at the end of the day, that Joint Select Committee, it wasn't as though it was chaired by an independent senator, as some are, or even the Speaker of the House, who I do believe is not a member of cabinet. It was chaired by a minister. And they're talking about things in a way that they're hashing out ideas. And of course, the process would obviously have to then go with the minister, maybe taking out the relevant discussion from the Joint Select Committee, potentially going to the technocrats in her ministry or other relevant ministries and other ministers, speaking about it, and then potentially presenting something for cabinet to debate. But the ministers be saying, no. Joint Select Committee is little brother. They can't do anything. They're just there for transparency. It unfortunately implies that they're less important. Despite the fact that, yes, I get it, he was trying to properly frame the importance. I think, though, because essentially saying, listen, cabinet did not cause this controversy, despite the fact that a minister and 2 permanent secretaries were part of the discussion. It wasn't just opposition member Rodney Charles. He might have instigated it. It might have never happened if he didn't instigate it, but at the end of the day, he was not the only participant. People either in cabinet or associated with cabinet were part of that discussion. He's trying to shift blame away from cabinet. I get that, but in doing so, I think it's a bit of an overreach. And it implies all the wrong things. It might be subtle, it might be minor, but it's still there. It's not necessarily effective. And unfortunately, one of the things that politicians need to understand is when you give out press releases, any sort of text, any sort of images with official documentation, letters, whatever, right? And even if you say it, it will be reported in print media and text mediums. People will ascribe, to some extent, what they're accustomed to with regards to your tone. That's the context that they will interpret your messages. That's the tone that they will mentally place on it. And, you know, especially how politicians tend to speak in Parliament a lot of the times. Many politicians are viewed as arrogant and defensive. So when you have these things, it will be viewed as arrogant and defensive statements. Because you've set yourself up, you set that precedent, and now you come out and you're quick to defend yourself. I don't know why. Why did you have to do? First of all, the Minister of Trade and Industry should have said this, not you. Because she should have clarified the Joint Select Committee that she chaired their position. But like I said, shoot from the hip. They don't really think about the long-term implications. Maybe I'm wrong. Finally, San Fernando's mayor. He is one Mr. Robert Paris. He is looking into things to deal with the traffic congestion situation in San Fernando. And at the end of the day, I'll just be brief. You know, it's nice that he is going to try to reinvent the wheel on the traffic situation in San Fernando. One former mayor, Port of Spain, tried to do something similar in Woodbrook and Port of Spain in general. And at the end of the day, these things aren't going to work. Let's just not beat around the bush. They're not going to work. Because we have a traffic congestion issue, because we have too many cars and not enough of a reliable mass transit public transportation system. We could try to finagle traffic and traffic regulations and traffic flow all we want. That's plasters on gaping wounds that are only going to get bigger. And the Ministry of Works and Transport is trying to solve the issue with more roads. Yeah, it's just going to make the situation bigger. Some aspects might solve it in some ways, but it will only go so far because the problem keeps growing, even if we get temporary relief. So, you know, I understand the mayor, he can only work with San Fernando. He can't deal with national mass transit, public transportation. But San Fernando is a city. To some extent, the national traffic situation is going to affect San Fernando. To some extent, right? Port of Spain has similar issues. How could we solve it? Well, New York solved it with mass transit. And there are many options, but maxi taxis and PH cars is not mass transit. And it's just, again, a plaster on the wounds. More importantly, at a time when crime is reached where it reached, unregulated taxis can't really be the safest option. But hey, like I said, they just want to ignore, we can't see a problem. They just want to ignore it and hope it goes away and hope you forget about it. Just wait until somebody dies because of an illegal taxi thing where they were kidnapped and taken to, oh wait, that happened many times already. Let's take a break. When we come back, we'll switch gears. We'll, of course, welcome the media ambassador from the TTPS, ASP Ali. When we return, speak about, well, some unfortunate criminal activity and maybe tips and warnings to prevent you from becoming a victim. Stay tuned.
The home of Caribbean content is growing, and we welcome you to be a part of the #1 platform for young personalities who are driven to make a positive impact in society. As we continue to reach every corner of Trinidad and Tobago through our daily broadcasts, our social media pages, or through our 75+ digital billboards across the nation, contact us to learn about our competitive rates via marketing at wesncc.com or call us at 628-5835. WESN Content Capital, television with a difference.
We are tackling the hard-hitting topics, some controversial topics, some topics we sweep under the rug. You don't always have to forgive in a relationship for it to move forward.
If it is you are in a situation where you forgive the person, but to the detriment of yourself, what are you really doing?
It is very uncommon for somebody in the younger age group to have dementia.
Atheists don't not believe.
Is that I can't disprove God, but you also can't prove God, so we cannot have a stalemate.
We'll focus on the woman who's being the victim,
right,
or the man who's being the victim. We exclude the children.
Folks are trying to study the underlying brain mechanism to figure out how does this particular disorder happen in the brain? How is the brain processing this?
Don't worry about AI. Worry about humans working with AI.
Are you willing to learn new skills to stay relevant for the future job market? That's the challenge that people are going to struggle with.
The issue, the continued rise in the price of flour and its impact on the cost of living in Trinidad and Tobago. How should we go about it? I want to ask you, what has been revealed to you about the state of vulnerability in the country because of this exercise and because of what we're going through? Is the government losing the war on the vaccine front?
The discussion should revolve around the common good for the greatest number of people in Trinidad and Tobago.
How do we inculcate a sense of respect and regard for people who may not be of your own political ilk or persuasion?
The communities are now being used by political opportunists. So
when the tables are turned, it's the same way. Okay, this has been 10 Questions. I'm Andy Johnson, and we'll see you next time.
are watching Strictly Legal on WESN Content Capital. Just give an overview of what exactly is that split arrangement.
Now you don't need to register nothing. You don't need. We can do that another time. But then it becomes a hit, and then everybody starts to want to claim.
The laws that predate many of the independent countries' constitutions are going to be those colonial laws.
We know there are an infinite amount of circumstances that would lead to a murder.
I have a great idea and, you know, I have a great concept, but until it's actually expressed, it does not become intellectual property.
Accomplishments or targets of a forensic accountant is to quantify what may have been lost.
We believe we defend criminals and we manipulated the law and we exploiting the system.
A responsible journalist will reach out to the person who they have the information on for a comment.
My name is Carl Media, and I'm the founder and the host of Ever Increasing Voice Ministries. Join me every Saturday and Sunday on WESN, this powerful station, at 9 a.m. on Saturdays, 1 p.m. and 7 p.m. nightly. Also on Sundays, I'll be on at 7 a.m., 1 p.m. and 7 p.m. at night time. When you come here, we are getting people heavenly ready.
Welcome back to the station in the nation that is often duplicated, but never imitated. Sorry, often imitated, never duplicated. All right. Yeah.
You get
yeah.
right. You get
yeah.
right. You get right.
I didn't get it. I failed in that one. But somebody who doesn't fail with the things that he says, we have Acting SP Ashraf Ali. Good morning, sir.
Good morning, Sean. How are you?
Well, that poor tagline failure notwithstanding, I am somewhat both in a strangely heated yet slightly amused mood this morning. But I want to set aside those emotions with all of the bacchanal going on to some extent, because I can't, you can't answer to things like Paria. But what you are here to speak about, though, motor vehicle larceny. And I think crimes like this goes on the radar because it's not murder, so we don't necessarily kind of keep track of it. Of course, we know certain vehicles are tempting targets and routinely more prone to get stolen. But, you know, my family had a car stolen with a car that was not classified as such, right, out of our yard. So these things, you know, the risk of it is very much a big deal. And it's not as though we could say, well, just because we drive this car, we're safe.
So true, so true. So, and one of the things that we had to look at is that when we keep mentioning the type of cars that are predominantly stolen, persons need to take heed of that if you own a car of that nature, right? And generally, when you look at it, so I have some data here, which is not nice data. Just for the year, beginning of the year up to the 22nd of February.
Okay.
For those first couple of days in the year, we had we had 263 vehicles stolen. 263 vehicles stolen in that short space of time. As compared to last year, 260, it was only 3 vehicles less. Those are very important statistics that persons need to understand. And out of the 263, 86 of those was also as a result of a robbery. So you have larceny motor vehicle, and you have larceny motor vehicle which involves a vehicle, which is a robbery, right? So you have flat larceny, so somebody would have stolen a vehicle,
right,
and then somebody would have robbed you of your vehicle.
Oh, so most of it is, I leave my car, it's missing.
Right.
But in a small group of that cases, I was carjacked.
Good. Technically in that
right,
in
and
that
potentially
context,
with a gun.
Which is that does not have to be a gun. Sometimes 3 or 4 persons would have accosted the individual and robbed the vehicle, because that is considered robbery with violence at the same time.
Would it be as though, like, I'm now going to my car and they intercept me? Or they get me to stop and come out of the car, we bounce?
So we have different circumstances. Only recently, over the weekend, persons normally will go for activities 3 o'clock in the morning, and an individual was going to his car after Lyman in the city. When he was approaching his vehicle, he was approached by 2 individuals that accosted him and took his vehicle. He was robbed of his vehicle. No. So it is not to say that somebody stopped him or intercepted his vehicle. They approached him because of where you park your vehicle. You're proceeding back to your vehicle. You got your vehicle lost and stolen. You were robbed. You was robbed of your vehicle, right? And these are some of the trends. So you have persons parking their vehicles in particular locations, coming back afterwards and realizing the vehicle was stolen. You have persons who are actually robbed of their vehicle, right? Going to events, going to parties, going to Limes on the weekend. While you're going to your vehicle, you were accosted, you were robbed of the vehicle. So you have multiple categories of those persons being losing their vehicles. And we continue to mention to persons that if you are, that's why we keep reinforcing the type of vehicles that our data is indicating that is prominent. And what the vehicles in question. So the vehicle in question, we have Nissan vehicles, which out of those figures, 123 was Nissans, which is the highest amount. And out of the Nissans, we have Nissan Tida, Nissan the 80 wagon, and you have like B14 on those things. Why? When you listen to robberies that is taking place and shootings involved. Those three vehicles are the category that are being utilized.
So they're stolen in order to commit crimes.
So yes, right? And they have been stolen not only for parts, which is scrapping the vehicles, but they commit offenses with it and discard it at sometimes.
Because I know of a case where the car was taken out of the yard, right? It was a Skoda. It was not Nissan.
Yeah.
It wasn't Honda. It wasn't a unique vehicle. There were some on the road, but it wasn't any of those. But it seemed as though that the criminals specifically targeted that car, right? A car that doesn't have quite the same. And why you ain't gonna take a Skoda to commit a crime for? It would stand out a bit more than just say the average. A Tida. There's so many Tidas that you're not gonna notice. Random Tida driving on the road.
Good,
right?
Not to mention, we also had Toyotas, with particular type of Toyotas, like Toyota Aqua, the Toyota Aqua, the Axio, and the Fielder wagons. Those are the next three categories. So you have the Nissan, the three categories of the Nissan, and the three categories of Toyota. Those are the prominent vehicles. And when we check our data and based on the fact that the amount of robberies are taking place and shootings,
right,
those are the vehicles that have been seen to be involved in it. So you always get a report of one of these type of vehicles. And because of a large number of those vehicles on the road, and a number of, so they no longer, the criminal elements no longer changing number plates.
They
drive, when they drive, they see a vehicle similar to theirs.
Right.
Right?
I
so
see.
let's say you use a Tida. They would look for a Tida and look at the Tida number plate and go and get a Tida number plate made and attach it to a stolen Tida. So when law enforcement officers are looking for this, then they check their records. The number plate is verified because it is registered to a Tida.
Okay.
So that is why the importance of that is why I want the public to understand. That is why we normally have a lot of exercises on the roads, stopping and checking persons whether or not you are legitimate or otherwise. Tidas. So we target these vehicles. So when you see we are stopping in the road and we do random checks, we look for these vehicles. We look to make sure, because at some point our information is there. Our intelligence suggests that these type of vehicles are being used. So persons feel that we are just doing it, causing traffic, as the case may be. But your vehicle number plate may have been used in another robbery with the same. So you have a Tida with your number plate, which is a legitimate vehicle.
Right.
And another Tida which was stolen, but it have your vehicle number plate on it. Same white, same model, everything. But how do police officers or law enforcement will be able to know that? We have to stop it and go further checks without they go all the way to the chassis.
No, but one would assume they commit the robbery and then that Tida is abandoned.
Exactly.
The license plate, the fake license plate might be ditched somewhere to make it harder to track.
So what I'm saying is not a fake license plate.
No, but when I say fake, the license
number
plate of
plate
the other vehicle, right?
For that vehicle.
Who knows how they dispose of their getaway car? But the point is that goes into the ether, and all the police have is, well, there's a real car registered under this number with this make and model and color.
Exactly.
And basically what I'm getting at too is, to some extent, the police have to be proactive, because if you try to react to that situation, you're so far behind the criminals, you'll never catch up, because you might not even find the getaway vehicle, much less be able to continue it further.
And one of the thing that it's unfortunate that the child got the most recent shooting in the fatality in.
Well, it's not technically it's not the most recent, because a 4-year-old got hit in the hand.
Yeah, no, but I'm talking about
the one last week
in
Laventille.
In Laventille. Because of the response of the officers, and because of the participating divisional officers, the task force and the other units was paying particular attention and keeping a presence in those areas, we were able to intercept a vehicle involved with 2 occupants in the vehicle. We found a firearm and narcotics in the vehicle, and they are subject of the inquiries related to the shooting. The mere fact that we are doing this in certain areas and trying to keep our presence on the ground, there is some value in it, and you realize that there are some opportunities for us to deter the criminals and doing certain things. But in general context, the amount of resources they need to keep putting on the ground in these areas, these fellas are them just randomly, is not to say that they have a trend, or we can look for a pattern. Yeah. They just decide that today I want to go and do a bit of shooting. They drive around, 2 or 3 of them in their vehicle, in their TIDA, in their whatever vehicle they have, spot you, the unsuspecting victim, steals your vehicle. 2 days after, vehicle was involved in some incident and discarded and disposed of. In some circumstances, some of these fellas go to an event, go to somewhere Lyman, and they want transport. So they don't have no vehicle to go back home. So they just they steal your vehicle, they rob you of your vehicle and whatever other possessions you have, your phone and every other whatever you have, steal the vehicle and just abandon the vehicle because they want a transport to go home. That is how brazen and difficult it is, because of these numbers that we have showing that how many vehicles we've stolen. And so in the east-west corridor, from St. Joseph all the way up to Aruka, close to as far as Arima, in that area, there's the highest amount of stolen vehicles in those divisions, because of the amount of residential areas, businesses, and malls and car parks. Those are prime opportunities for persons to steal vehicles, and we keep on sending on the messages to persons that if your vehicle is one of those vehicles falls in the category of the vehicles that are normally stolen, take some more attention and more caution as to your vehicle.
Because I need to ask, I mean, I don't know if I've ever seen a car alarm go off and it led to the capture of a criminal, right? Because it's such a mundane thing. Car alarm goes off, and then the person comes and they fumble with the control to shut it off, and then they go back on their business, right? Should the public put faith in anti-theft devices, and should they take it a step further than just a car alarm? Because at this point, that's just an automatic assumption that the criminals probably have ways to overcome that.
So, like with every device, there will be someone and a criminal element who look to do counterproductive to counter the device. I mean, you cannot get away from that. But the fact that you were going to allow them to delay their opportunity or slow them down gives you an opportunity. Gives you an opportunity to defend yourself, right? Or stop your vehicle from getting stolen. So yes, investing in some security devices for your vehicle, GPS tracking, alarm systems, whatever you believe is necessary for you, or based on your financial situation, invest in it, because I'm sure a device of that nature is not going to cost the value of a vehicle. So we have to look at it from in 2 perspectives. Now, those vehicles, and that is not for those vehicles. So notwithstanding other vehicles have not been stolen. There are other vehicles that have been stolen.
Right, yes.
But they are more on the higher end and a lot less. We have a lot of Kias, Kia 2700 and Hyundai 800 being stolen.
So when I was speaking about the scooter, like, is there also the potential that, you know, criminals might target a specific car for whatever reason, parts or somebody wanted that car for something?
So there is, in fact, a market for those things because the number of those vehicles on the road, they don't have, remember, those are not local vehicles. Yeah. Those are vehicles that have been imported.
Somebody I know, her new car, somebody took the casing of the rearview mirror.
Yes.
They just took it from, it was parked on the road, you know, so the car was relatively safe, but somehow they managed to disassemble and took the casing.
Yeah, so there's several different reasons and different factors for persons stealing motor vehicles. Financial gains is one. Some persons, like I said, we want to ask the question, why they steal this vehicle? Because there's no need to steal the vehicle. In less than 15-20 minutes time, we realize that the vehicle has been abandoned in a particular area.
Right.
And when the vehicles are abandoned in particular areas, we know that the individuals in the area that's abandoned the vehicle and gone about their business, so they go back home go back into the home as normal because they didn't need that vehicle for any particular reason. Might just be to reach home. And these are some of the criminal elements, and that is why I'm saying.
You know, I've never. It's not that I don't believe that this doesn't happen elsewhere. It's just that somehow I have never heard this happening before.
It is real.
We will steal a car because I don't want to travel.
And no, you gotta remember.
For one drive.
Remember,
I'm gonna commit such a large crime literally just out of convenience.
You know what? Because certain elements live in certain areas are unable to venture in and out without transport. So this is some of the things that we look at, right? And persons say we stereotyping or anything like that, but it's targeted operations against criminal elements in certain communities that we know that vehicles have been left abandoned in those areas. And when they're left abandoned in those areas, there's no information coming forward. It's just a vehicle left abandoned.
Like I'm not all for employers looking at a geographical location and saying I don't trust anybody coming out of there. But y'all are different. Y'all are looking at results, and y'all are looking at patterns of behavior.
Yeah.
And statistically speaking, the analysis says this sort of thing happens here. It doesn't necessarily happen there. So we're going to look out for it here. And if that might be a hot spot, it might be in a city area, East Port of Spain, etc., 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 something, East-West corridor, etc., etc., etc. It is what it is.
It is what it is, and that is why we keep enforcing in two aspects. We keep educating the public as to the type of vehicles that you own, because that's your choice. Your freedom of choice in purchasing what you have. But when you purchase those vehicles, there's a risk associated with those type of vehicles based on your economics. And then there's the education, and then we're talking about the enforcement. So then when we keep on doing our enforcement, we have to do the enforcement in parallel.
And just to close, it's similar, I think, in theory, to when you're speaking about home invasions and putting things in place to protect your home. To some extent, and I find this somewhat lamentable, you don't necessarily have to be impregnable. You just have to be a harder target than those around you to protect yourself.
Yeah.
Except, you know, like on a micro level, that's fine. You protect yourself. On a macro level, though, somebody's probably still going to get robbed. So you still have the problem.
Exactly. So at the end of the day, when we sending messages out, we give tips about leaving your vehicle parked in unlit areas, in dark areas, going to areas, knowing that you have a vehicle that is known to be on the list of stolen vehicles, the #1 list of stolen vehicles, type of stolen vehicles, or you fall in that category, and you are driving that. You need to be very cautious when you're going in a vehicle, where you're parking the vehicle, and how you're leaving a vehicle unattended and going about your business. Because it's kind of hard. It's difficult after you're going, you're having a nice event, or you go to sleep in the night and get up in the morning, and you come outside looking for a vehicle, and your vehicle's gone. The trauma associated with that, I mean, persons go through different type of trauma. Then
even where you park it at home.
Yes, sometimes some persons do not have any facility available for them, any particular garage or fence. They park on the roads of Trinidad and Tobago. right, in and around close to their properties, and those are also opportunities for persons to steal the vehicle.
All right. A lot to get through. The statistics are large, except we have so many cars on the road, you know, it might seem a blip. That's why you probably don't know anybody that has gotten their car stolen within a period, even though a couple hundred were. But we'll take a break. We'll continue on speaking with the ASP. And of course, you could call in and have your say as well and ask him questions as well. Stay tuned. This is Talking About WSN, your content capital show. Michael Small, Ashraf Ali. We'll be right back.
Hello there and welcome to AM Prime on WESN Content Capital. Before we even start this repatriation and reintegration process, we've already failed, or are we doomed to fail?
You've got to invest in the institutions that you've established to carry out those sorts of core functions.
We now get into the regional updates to give you an understanding of what's happening across our neighboring islands.
We have available a number of films that are worth showing.
So it was day one when the French Revolution started to develop the concept of universal human rights.
What happened this time is unprecedented. It's one of the largest terrorist attacks in history.
Let's welcome Carl to the program. Carl is over there, next to Insta. Hello, Carl.
Silky anteater or pygmy anteater, and we have two of the three species of anteaters right here.
Let's try this one again. They may imitate us, but they can never duplicate us. WSN's Talking About here, Sean Michael Small with the media ambassador from the TPS, acting SP Ashraf Ali. Now we open up the phone lines. You want to hear from the viewer, you could ask whatever it is you want to ask. Dare I challenge a government official that might disagree with me to call live and vent their frustration? How dare I besmirch the government with regards to giving my opinion that doesn't always hold them in the best of light? Well, you know, the phone lines are open. You could call in. Of course, I am more than welcoming of criticisms from the general public as well, but just be prepared to have a discussion about it. We're not going to just, you know, freely just accept, you know, counterclaims. You know, we want to have a discussion. That's the whole point of Talking Points. But while we wait for phone calls, and usually I get interrupted as the question is finished. Yeah, but who knows, maybe we'll actually be able to get through part of it this time, because to be brief, it came up, I think, last week. I can't remember why. But I think people have a misconception about the education of police officers, because more than once off air you've told me that there are officers who are quite educated, and the service is not just a set of, you know, fellas with 5 passes that don't know nothing. There are people with degrees that are...
I'm glad you brought that up, because the minimum requirement currently to join Trinidad and Tobago Police Service is 5 safety subjects.
Right.
The minimum requirement.
Yes.
It does not say that an individual who has more than that cannot.
Right,
it's
exactly.
just the minimum. So there are officers who currently came into the police service, not during the course of their police service career, but who came into the police service with bachelor's degree, master's degree, and there are officers who are actually pursuing their doctorate within the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service. Now, persons got to ask the question, why? But when you look at the context and the contents of these type of degree, it broadens your horizon.
Yes.
And your scope of different things in terms of management and leadership, and how you deal with customers and all of that. So it gives you a different perspective. right? Yes, law enforcement requires 5 CXC subjects. That is just the basic requirement. So then afterwards you are allowed to continue. Even at in Costa there is the the associate degree in public safety and security. They offer that as a 2-year program that police officers and other law enforcement officers and other agencies under the umbrella of national security are allowed 2 years to go and pursue that course, right? And the police, that is not new. It has been afforded to police officers throughout the years, right? So there are a lot of qualified and educated police officers in different areas outside of policing, right?
And then, of course, one of the basic things, and we might underestimate it, but you see this in military services around the world, business administration degrees, management degrees, because at the end of the day, your primary product is very much a human resource-based product.
You do not always want an officer to enter the organization with the minimum basic requirements and do not look to elevate yourself and widen your scope. There are a lot of courses that the training college as well as other agencies offer the police officers to increase their competence and capabilities in different areas. Right? So when you believe that people, when I listen how the public view and say, them officers only have 5 subjects, they do nothing else, I just sit down and laugh. I could tell you my personal experience.
But do you know, you might not know, but to what extent, like what the ratios are, how many applicants are closer to the minimum and how many are coming in with at least a bachelor's? Are you kind of aware?
I'm not too sure about the data because of the fact that a lot of persons, after they finish their schooling with their 5 subjects, they do automatically enter the police service directly.
Right.
So you don't have a lot of officers.
16.
Right, 16. By 18 is 18 the entry. So between the age of 16, 17, 18, a lot of persons have pursued advanced, some tertiary level, and some may have gone to a certificate level, a diploma level, then you go to, and so we will have those type of things backwards.
That's a good point. The age limit is 18, right?
Yes.
You can't be a minor and become a police officer.
No.
But not everybody does CXC at 18.
Exactly.
So that alone kind of just says...
Those 2 years period, you can increase
you can develop yourself a little bit.
Academics a little more.
Okay, we have San Fran on the line. Good morning, caller. You on the air? Caller, good morning.
Good morning, Sean.
Morning, morning.
Good morning, ESP Ali.
Good morning, sir.
Two things I want to comment on today. One was that issue you talked about, Sean, with the road in Tobago that have country planning. Let me say this to you. There are so many projects that the state undertakes, construction projects without town and country planning. So Tobago is not unique in this regard. There are so many HDC projects that the state undertakes, and they do not get it. People have moved into some of those housing projects, and those projects still have not gotten approval. Right? That is one. Secondly, listening to ESP, you talk about the police officers with degrees and stuff. Let me just say this. I want to put this in perspective. The state of Trinidad and Tobago, up to 2016, spent over $8 billion on gate. A lot of people in a lot of state agencies, including the police service, went and got their degrees, who had degrees, and who had bachelors, and they get masters. People, it was open sepulchre, so to speak. And it has not benefited. If you look at it on the surface, it has not benefited the government or the state of Trinidad and Tobago, with all that money being spent, and on a lot of those people are employed within the state apparatus. So the police service is not unique to that. The issue is not having degrees. The issue is we have a problem, one of management of state agencies, and one of dedication by those employees. Have a good day.
Thank you, caller. Yes, it was wrong of me. I've forgotten some of my own commentary, in fact, when I think there was at least one case where there was HEC houses on a floodplain or a floodplain area. So Talking Point has lamented that it's seemingly, town and country planning seemingly is an absent father when it comes to its job. But no offense to, well, actually, no. I should not be apologizing to absentee fathers because that's a bad thing. But I actually see Mr. San Fernando's point with regards to the fact that, and we said this before as well, Gate, it looked good, you know, it smelled good, it sounded good. It didn't actually do anything. It was a used car salesman for all intents and purposes. It sold the country on a dream that the country hasn't actually been able to realize. And I do wonder if he's right that at the end of the day, we still have like a management and meritocracy problem, so I'm hesitant because now we're going towards talking about your boss.
I'm not going there. That's a conversation for some other persons.
Yeah.
But based on the caller, he's indicating the academics, and I'm saying, look, like it everything. There's a pros and cons with it, right? The mere fact that there was opportunity for individuals within police officers within Trinidad and Tobago Police Service. Now, the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service as an organization do in fact have both local and international courses that they offer to, that they send their officers to do. And it is based on the principles that we want to develop the organization and the officers within the organization in specific areas. So yes, so there are officers who would have gone, who do fingerprint courses, ballistic. Most recently, we have a number of officers who did ballistic courses that will be part of the Forensic Science Center, because they are specialists in ballistics now. And we're talking about active police officers.
Here's a flip side to that. Like, do you have to be a police officer to have a role like that where you're not actually going out?
You don't have to.
So you don't have to be a police officer to be in the ballistics center.
So
okay.
Under the forensic science, you don't have to be a police officer. But the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service chose officers within our organization to train those officers to work alongside the forensics.
So you can become a police officer to be a ballistics technician, but you don't have to be. You could be a civilian and go. And there will be details that are different.
Some other details.
Those who want the career need to look into that.
And we have also encouraged police officers who have chosen to go along the line of being lawyers, right?
Yes.
To get your relevant qualification because of the levels of lawyers that we have. The competence of some lawyers that we have in the courts and the transition and how the courts are operating. We want to get police officers who are trained as lawyers, who are able to, who are called to the bar, present themselves as, how I should say, prosecutors, who is prosecutors now representing the police service.
Also, timing-wise, it's not as though Gates was going on for the last 50 years and every officer, I mean, is there still like, to some extent, if there were going to be benefits from Gates, you know, the people who went through that system, they are still on the younger end. Is that correct for me to say, I think? Or no?
It's a mix. It's a mix, right? Because of the fact that I can speak to myself. I have 2 associate degree and a bachelor's.
Right.
And I did it on my own, right? I expanded my knowledge base so I can deal with different areas, because as a police officer, it is not about law alone. When persons come to you, there are multiple things that they ask you. They expect a police officer to have a wide knowledge of certain things. Yes, the basic requirements is 5 subjects. Yes, when you come through the academy, they understand the basic principles of the law, the police duties. And when you reach the front line, in terms of, when I say front line, you're actually starting to serve the public. You realize that the public comes to you and asks a multitude of questions because they expect that when they come to the police station, the police can give them advice on various things. But and I'm saying that an officer should be a specialist in or have knowledge of everything, but he should be able to guide the citizens
Right.
in specific areas with that level of understanding that you have.
And of course, there's the flip side where academics don't, I mean, part of the argument is academics don't always equate to success.
So true.
Right? And the results that we want. So then the flip side is, to some extent, we are looking at potentially officers who did come in with the minimum, and we're prejudging them, hence prejudice. And some of the best officers might be the ones that started at the lowest points.
And they
might not even necessarily have gotten much tertiary education even after the fact, but just, you know, with their experience and their judgment, we don't know.
Persons make, I've heard this comment that all the subject you have, you can't be, they don't ever be a good police officer, or somebody who have no qualification and they now come in and is a good police officer. Persons need to understand, when you come in to no school will teach you policing.
Yeah.
When you come into the police service, you learn the laws of Trinidad and Tobago. You learn the premises of what policing is, the foundation of policing. And then you start to practice policing as a police officer. Now, policing is a broad scope here, but policing as from a law enforcement perspective, a police officer practicing policing, because policing is a context, is a concept, I should say, right? You police a lot of different things.
Right.
You would police, you could police a lot of different things, but in law enforcement, you're policing specific areas. And that is where I'm saying our knowledge of policing and policing related fields, psychology, sociology, intelligence, all of that falls under the category of policing. And that is why officers are expanding, and we have officers who have been introduced to and have been qualified in several of those areas, right? So it is not a lack of educated police officers cannot solve crime. Solving crime is not about the education that you have. It's multiple factors. It has factors outside of the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, social issues, and then other supporting areas that we have to look at why crimes are not being
Because there's a flip side, right? Like, you don't have to have a degree to be a successful criminal to innovate, right? Some innovators that innovated important services or products in the world are undereducated compared to their peers, right? And I think some people might be saying, well, hey, if all they are so educated, how come the criminals seem to be getting away with all of these things? But I think part of it is society is more complex, just in general. So the challenges are more complex. So the demands on the police service, you know, just to keep up, is higher than before.
So let's bring it back to the topic of conversation where I started off with lastly motor vehicles, right? The number of vehicles on the road, number of vehicles of a particular type, the amount of education that we have been putting out, still we have persons who are not heeding the information that the police and not understanding their personal security and securing their property, still going ahead and doing things that contributed to and adding to the number of lasting motor vehicles that we have. At what point in time are you going to heed the heed and understand there will always be a certain amount of persons, right, who believe that it will never happen to me until it happened to me. And they throw caution into the wind, you park your vehicle, you have a good time, and your vehicle has been stolen.
So that's an interesting point, because I do believe it's true. I think to some extent we all kind of fall victim to that thinking at some point in some way. Even if we try to have a realistic perception of that, we're still prone to some extent to fall victim to that. And could it be that there's something similar with regards to police expectations? We just have this unrealistic view of the world where it's not going to happen to me, but it happens to me, and then I expect the police to be this magic bullet that's supposed to solve my problem as soon as possible, you know, and restore me completely back to where I was before it happened, which more often than not is impossible, because how are y'all going to do that? You all have the police. You all are not super insurance.
And it's interesting that you just brought that up, and something just came to my mind. One of the things that the large number of vehicles on the road, we have a lot of minor accidents and sometimes serious accidents. So I'm going to deal with the issues of minor accidents. Sometimes, why do people come to the police and report an accident?
Well, I believe to have a record of
and for insurance purposes. And when they come to the police, they expect the police to tell you who is right and wrong. But you know, if you really analyze it, every accident was a result of somebody failing to comply with the laws of Trinidad and Tobago in terms of the Motor Vehicle and Road Traffic Act. Somebody breached it. Either one driver breached it or not.
No, you could have mechanical failure.
Fair enough. But a mechanical failure,
once you take
mechanical failure is also part of the motor vehicle because you're supposed to have a working vehicle as per the Motor Vehicle and Road Traffic Act. So when you look at it from that perspective, the only reason persons come to the police is for the police to satisfy their requirements for insurance, to tell the insurance who is right and who is wrong, because it's benefiting either party. But at the end of the day, is it benefiting society? Because you are still an errand driver. You still fail to comply with the laws of the road. You still drive in a manner that is not in best keeping with defensive driving and understanding what the other driver is doing. But only when an accident takes place or some incident, you come to the police and give a version of the story to say that I was right, my version is right, the other driver is wrong, and the police had to be mediated in a minute and from that perspective.
I hate to say this, one of the things that I dislike, and I'm not immune to this, unfortunately, is just the environment of it. You can't admit, because if you admit, you might be taken advantage of, I guess you could say.
Exactly.
Unfortunately,
so,
right?
So when you look at it from that perspective, there are certain things that we will enforce. We would educate, because not everything you can enforce. You have to do some education, because the more you educate, more you inform, more you make persons self-aware about certain things, right? And that is where preventative policing comes in. We'll have less to detect. So it's a balancing act that we are doing right now, trying to do as much education through our social media platforms and other entities, educating persons in certain areas, hoping that we can have a reduction in some of the areas in terms of where you, the individual, has a role to play to assist.
No. We have reached a point where I think I have to ask this question,
sure,
because given the level of education and the demands on the service, you know, I think cynics and critics will look at some of the petty issues that they've seen in social media now. And it that's, I think, disconnect. People, to some extent, they're going to look at the service and look at these anecdotal examples as, you see, 5 passes. How could we expect more from them when they're slapping cell phones out of hands?
No, I love that way. I love where we're going.
So
I just love that question, because I love when anybody brings that up. You know why?
Well, I have to, because I know people will bring it up.
Have you ever seen on social media the good that the police have done? One incident is broadcast across the board, highlighting a negative, or I should say negative, I wouldn't say negative, right? An incident. All of a sudden, that is the parameter or the foundation in which you want to judge the police service. However, you don't get persons posting up, very few who would send and say, look at it, I'm seeing a high presence of police officers in this area. We are feeling safe. We are glad to see the police officers working outside there when you are enjoying yourself. You would not see that, because that would not make social media likes.
It wouldn't.
Right? So I understand that persons want to choose how they want to view the police officers and incidents of police officers. But at the end of the day, we in the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service understand that, hey, we are not taking those one incidents and trying to paint the entire police service in that, because we have a lot of good police officers who continue to go out there, educate, and as we close in, educate persons, bring information to the public as to these things like lasting motor vehicles, safety tips that we have been doing since pre-carnival and post-carnival and going into the Easter. This level of education is part of our policing, and is part of policing, right, where we educate the public from that perspective. So I hope that the public out there adhere to or listen to our information about the vehicles that you are driving. And if you have those type of vehicles and fall into the category of the Nissans, the Toyotas, the Aquas, the Tidas, you take a little more care and a little more attention to your vehicle, where you park your vehicle, where you leave your vehicle, so it would not be a part of our statistics.
And I'll just close with saying, you know, my disagreements with the Prime Minister's stance on who and what you support with regards to policing notwithstanding, despite all the criticisms we may have, others may have, you might hear, I'll always say, but we still have to be engaged with the police, do our part in the process, and give the service the support that it needs, and that includes not judging the entire service by one or two bad examples that go viral. Because at the end of the day, crime comes from society, police comes from society, to some extent society is part of the process and we can't get away from it. So thank you, SPLE, for joining me today. Thank you, Mr. San Fernando, for calling in. I know we had some technical difficulties that may or may not have affected calls. We apologize for that. But at the end of the day, folks, you can make it a good day, as my co-host always says. Despite all my cynicism, I still believe in TNT, as does all of my contributors, I am sure. That's why we're here to speak to you, like ASPLE. And we hope that our brothers and sisters, well, that's a very political term, but still apt in this case, our brothers and sisters, we all come together to do our part to make this Twin Island paradise, well, a bit more what it used to be, perhaps, than what it is right now. But we say goodbye. We will see you tomorrow morning.
WESN. FanZone, your reliable, authentic supplier, has just gotten better. You can now visit our website www.fanzonett.com for your authentic wear and collectibles. The only place where you can use both your Visa debit and credit cards. Visit our website fanzonett.com to make your purchase today.
My name is Carl Media. I'm the founder and the host of Ever Increasing Voice Ministries. Join me every Saturday and Sunday on WESN, this powerful station, at 9 a.m. on Saturdays, 1 p.m. and 7 p.m. nightly. Also on Sundays, I'll be on at 7 a.m., 1 p.m. and 7 p.m. at night time. When you come here, we are getting people heavenly ready.
This is Face of Sports, WESN Content Capital. How you felt about the kiss on the lip?
That's the business. I'm not to do with that.
I find that was distasteful.
The national senior team, whether you like it or not, that is the model for all other teams to follow.
I'm assuming that the regional requirement may be a much stricter requirement.
This is not about Pro League and Super League. This is a league run by the Normalization Committee that I'm responsible for.
Nobody expected FIFA to fund this arrangement.
If we don't get a professional attitude towards this, we are doomed for failure.
You break the balance, trip the leg, control the body.
They ain't gonna stand put forever.
Why you want the Chiefs to lose so? Why you want the Chiefs to lose so?
They already have two. Lamar don't
Why?
have.
You're jealous because you know the Chiefs getting closer to the Patriots. Let's go to the last part.
No,
of
not
Let's go to the last part.
The issue, the continued rise in the price of flour and its impact on the cost of living in Trinidad and Tobago. How should we go about it? I want to ask you what has been revealed to you about the state of vulnerability in the country because of this exercise and because of what we're going through. Is the government losing the war on the vaccine front?
The discussion should revolve around the common good for the greatest number of people in Trinidad and Tobago.
How do we inculcate a sense of